She stood alone by the aircraft's landing gear, her fingers tracing the hydraulic lines like a pianist, brushing familiar keys. Why was everyone walking past her without a second glance when she might have been the only one who could save them all? Mila Kuznetsova didn't flinch when the base alarm pierced the morning calm. But 20 minutes earlier, she'd just been checking tire pressure on the tarmac. The same task she'd done for nearly 2 years. Now she stood at the edge of a decision. No one saw coming, least of all the people trained to make it. The F-35 sat beside her. Cockpit sealed, power off, and for the first time, it wasn't just a machine she was maintaining. It was a door. She was either about to walk through it or close it forever. No one noticed her staring longer than necessary at the jet. Why would they? At just over 5 feet tall and quiet to a fault, Mila blended in with the ground crew's rhythm like a background hum. Reliable, respectful, invisible. Her father used to say there were 2 types of soldiers, the ones who announced themselves, and the ones who waited until it mattered. The morning at Ramstein Air Base had started like every other fuel trucks grumbling down the lines. Crews checking avionics, the sharp smell of jet fuel clinging to uniforms. Mila had woken early, just like always. She hadn't spoken a word until she was under the wing of aircraft 075234, hands stained with grease, mind rehearsing systems she wasn't even allowed to fly. Kuznetsova came a bark from the side. It was Brooks, her crew chief. "How's that landing gear looking?" "Pressure nominal, hydraulics clean. No stress fractures detected," she replied. Accent perfect in its precision, but edged in Ukrainian melody. Her words, like her work, were efficient, measured. Brooks didn't compliment, he just grunted and moved on. She didn't need praise. She needed one thing: time. And every day she wasn't a pilot. She treated like borrowed time. Mila had been transferred here from Poland 18 months ago, just after tensions near her homeland had reached a boil. She never told anyone at Ramstein what it was like to grow up with an Air Force colonel as a father. She didn't mention the simulator time she'd logged in secret as a teenager, or how many hours she'd spent replaying ejection procedures and radar lock failures in her mind. What would it matter? A foreign-born, low-ranking maintenance tech didn't belong in pilot briefings, not even if she understood every acronym before the instructor said it. But still, she couldn't stop studying. Even now, on her short break, while others checked their phones or scrolled memes, Mila sat alone at the edge of the mess hall, flipping through a tattered avionics manual like it was scripture. There were patterns in those system subtleties that spoke louder than orders. She saw things in the F-35s no one else seemed to notice. "Daydreaming again, Kuznetsova?" Mila looked up. It was Staff Sergeant Martinez, one of the few people who ever smiled at her. "Just making sure everything's perfect," Mila said. Martinez nodded. "That's the attitude. You hear we've got a newbie from the 480th Flying today? Fresh meat?" Mila had heard. She'd even watched him pre-flight yesterday. Lieutenant Davidson, nervous, stiff, checking switches 3 times over like they might bite. The poor guy reminded her of stories her father used to tell of pilots who looked the part, but never heard the aircraft breathe. "The F-35 is forgiving," she said softly, almost to herself, "but only if you respect it." Martinez squinted at her. "You really know your birds." Mila just smiled and shrugged. "You learn things when you pay attention." But what Martinez didn't know, what no one here knew, was that Mila had been paying attention since she was 6. Every summer, her father would bring her to the airfields outside Kyiv. She'd crawl into cold cockpits, run her fingers across panels and gauges. By 15, she could diagram thrust vectoring systems in her sleep. By 17, she was logging simulator hours that rivaled cadet programs. But war came, and with it, the choice: stay and scrape by or go west and send money home. The U.S. Air Force didn't want pilots from Ukraine. They wanted ground crew, so she gave them ground crew. And quietly, in secret, she kept giving herself everything else. Every spare minute she had, she read manuals, weather pattern studies, flight tactic theory. She'd memorized NATO intercept protocols before she ever set foot on American soil. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because someday, maybe she'd be needed. And if that moment came, it wouldn't announce itself. It wouldn't arrive with medals or ceremonies. It would arrive with silence. And sirens. That night, after shift change, Mila walked back to her dorm. The sky above the base was clear, the kind of night that always made her think of altitude. She passed laughing airmen, faces glowing in the blue haze of phone screens. In her room, her roommate, Phillips, asked the same question she always did when Mila pulled out her study materials. Why do you read that stuff? You're never going to be a pilot. American women barely make it through the program. You? Come on. Phillips wasn't cruel, just honest in that lazy, comfortable way people are when they believe the system already works. Mila didn't answer. She didn't need to. She closed the door, set her alarm for 0430, and opened her simulator. Tablet. Tonight's scenario. Emergency intercept, 2-on-4 engagement, limited airspace. She ran through it 3 times before sleep, once in English, once in Ukrainian, and once with no sound, just motion and breath, and in the silence between runs. She thought about what her father always told her. Opportunity never knocks for people like us. You have to build the door yourself and stand beside it. She had no idea that the door she'd spent her life building would open in just 9 hours. And when it did, no one would be waiting to hold it open for her. They'd already decided she didn't belong on the other side. But she was about to show them, sometimes silence isn't submission, it's preparation. Why were 2 aircraft down today, of all days? Mila's boots hit the concrete hard as she jogged toward building 242, adrenaline already beginning to replace the quiet focus she carried through most mornings. The klaxon hadn't stopped. The flashing red emergency lights soaked everything in urgency. Around her, personnel scrambled into motion. None of them knew what she knew not yet. Inside, the briefing room buzzed with tension. Major Harrison stood in front of the digital map. Display. Red icons crawling across the screen like wasps toward German airspace. Everyone around her, pilots, controllers, operations staff, spoke in clipped tones, all trying to maintain professionalism while facing the cold shadow of potential conflict. This is not a drill, Harrison said, voice sharp, commanding. At 083 NATO radar tracked multiple unidentified aircraft approaching from the northeast. No transponders, no acknowledgement of comms. Flight vectors suggest reconnaissance, but hostile. Intent cannot be ruled out. Mila remained still in the back, holding a maintenance tablet, trying not to draw attention. She wasn't even supposed to be in the room. A discrepancy in her hydraulic log had brought her here, and now, a silent question hung in her gut. Why was no one accounting for the system? Failure she had already predicted. Davidson, nervous, green, still in that awkward stage of triple-checking checklists, raised his hand. What's the fallback if aircraft experience failures before launch? 2 backup birds, Harrison answered, gesturing toward 2 highlighted icons. 075221 and 075267. Crew chiefs report they're close to flight ready. That was a lie, or at least, not the whole truth. Mila knew those birds. She'd worked on them. She knew exactly what had gone wrong, and more importantly, how long it would take to fix if things were done by the book. But no one was asking her. Not really, not beyond the occasional. Thanks, Airman. Harrison began reading off call signs. Martinez, Chun, Davidson, Thompson, 4 pilots, 4 jets. Then the radio crackled. Sir, this is Tech Sergeant Brooks. For maintenance, we've got a problem. 2 F-35s are down. Hydraulic system failures. Estimated repair time. Minimum 2 hours. Harrison's jaw tightened. Too long. Too late. Mila's stomach dropped. She'd flagged the same vulnerability in maintenance reports weeks ago. No one listened then. Now, everyone was paying attention, but not to her. "We need 4 in the air, immediately," Colonel Peterson growled as he stormed into the room. Suit half-zipped, already processing scenarios. 2 birds down? That's unacceptable. Mila stepped forward, heart pounding. Her voice was quiet. "Steady. Sir, I might be able to help." The room froze. Dozens of eyes turned toward her like she was speaking another language. Major Harrison narrowed his eyes. "Kuznetsova, right? This isn't the time for maintenance questions." "It's not a routine issue, sir," she replied. "Aircraft 075267's failure is isolated. The primary hydraulic system is operational. I can override the secondary. With a manual protocol, the jet can be mission-ready in 20 minutes. Silence. Then Brooks's voice burst over the radio. "Negative, sir. That's against regulation." "No redundancy, no go." Peterson's voice sliced through. "She's right about one thing, the 01 F-3501. Allows it under emergency intercept protocol. But still, she's not a pilot. Even if she fixes it, who's flying it?" That's when Mila said it. The words she'd rehearsed 1,000 times in her head, but never spoken aloud. "Sir, I am." Her voice didn't tremble. "Not this time. I've logged over 300 hours of F-35 simulation, advanced tactical scenarios, emergency protocols, intercept procedures." The room didn't believe her. She could see it on their faces. Disbelief, suspicion, and worse, amusement. Peterson blinked. "Kuznetsova, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're a maintenance tech. You're not certified. You're not even flight rated. You don't belong in that cockpit." Mila didn't flinch. "I know the procedures better than some certified pilots," she said. "I can prove it today." It wasn't arrogance. It was conviction, quiet, earned. But in the eyes of the room, it was delusion. Martinez stepped toward her, concern in her eyes. "Mila, listen to me. I know you're trying to help, but this isn't the way. People are going to think you're cracking under pressure." No one knew what to do with her. She was a ghost-speaking prophecy, someone they'd seen 100 times a day, but never really looked at. Davidson spoke up, doubt laced in every word. "Even if you know the systems, flying's different. You need instincts. You need to feel it." "I felt it," Mila replied quietly. "Every night, every sim, every procedure memorized. Not for the badge, for this." Harrison leaned in, eyes hard. "If you touch that throttle, it's theft of military property. Unauthorized operation, treason, maybe. Do you understand that?" "I do, sir." Then walk away. But she didn't, because she'd already made the decision. Somewhere deep inside, days ago, years ago. The first time she sat in a wooden chair while her father pointed at flight diagrams by candlelight. They would call her reckless. They would say she disobeyed. They would not say she was wrong. Outside, the runway boiled in heat haze. Inside her, something colder burned. Not rebellion, responsibility. She turned without a word and walked toward the hangar. They'd told her to stay in her lane, but someone had to take off before it was too late. She climbed the ladder like she'd done 100 times before. Only this time, it wasn't to check pressure valves or calibrate a sensor. This time, she wasn't climbing for someone else. Had the canopy always been this heavy? Or was it just the weight of knowing what came next? The moment she sealed herself inside the cockpit of aircraft 075267, silence washed over her like water. The outside world faded, the chaos, the shouts, the disbelief still echoing across the hangar. She was alone now, with the machine, with the truth. Her hands moved across the panels with a rhythm that didn't need thought. Engine on, navigation aligned, COM mis-synced. Every step burned into her like a prayer. The sim hours had never felt more real or more distant. This was the real thing, and it felt right. Then the headset came to life. Aircraft 075267. This is ground control. You are powering up without clearance. Identify yourself. She exhaled, then keyed the mic. Ground control. This is Senior Airman Mila Kuznetsova. I am in control of 075267. Aircraft is fully mission capable and ready for intercept. 10 seconds of silence, then chaos. Say again. Affirmative. I request clearance to join intercept formation. From the tower to operations to base command. Her name shot through the chain of command like a spark through dry grass. Confusion, anger, shock. Major Harrison's voice broke through first, laced with fury and disbelief. Kuznetsova, you are ordered to shut down that aircraft immediately and report to security personnel. You are not authorized for flight operations. This is not a joke. Sir, I understand your concern, she replied calmly. But the F-35 is ready, and you need 4 aircraft in the air. I am your 4th. Lieutenant Colonel Peterson didn't wait. His voice came through cold and sharp. You have 10 seconds to shut down that jet and exit the cockpit, or you'll face arrest and court-martial. Unauthorized operation of a weapons system. Theft of government property. You'll be done. Forever. She didn't respond right away. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. The difference between cowardice and courage isn't fear. It's whether you act anyway. She looked ahead. The runway shimmered like a blade in the sun. The engine hummed beneath her. Steady. Ready. Then she answered, Sir. I acknowledge the consequences, but standing down ensures failure. Launching gives us a chance. Another silence. Then someone unexpected. A new voice, older, calmer, more powerful. This is Colonel Sarah Mitchell, NATO Tactical Aviation Command. The voice said over the encrypted channel, I've been monitoring. What's the current intercept capability status? Harrison jumped in. Colonel, we have 2 certified pilots ready, but our doctrine requires 4. This airman claims flight qualifications, but claims? Mitchell cut in. Or demonstrates. She's not certified, no official. Training, no record. Then tell me, Major, what are your immediate options for fielding a full intercept team? Silence again, then Mila's voice, steady. Colonel Mitchell, 075267 is mission ready. I can provide the 4th aircraft. I've trained for this. If I fail, I'll accept the consequences. But if I don't launch, you'll already have failed. A pause. You understand, Mitchell said slowly. If your wrong people could die, you could ignite a war. You could destroy your own life. Yes, ma'am, but inaction guarantees failure. Let me prove capability matters more than credentials. Another long beat. Then finally words. That changed everything. Aircraft 075267, Mitchell said. You are cleared for immediate departure. Prove your qualifications through mission success. Or be prepared to face the consequences. Mila didn't flinch. Roger. Control, she said. Aircraft 075267 departing for intercept mission. See you when I get back. The jet surged forward. She felt the thrust push her deep into the seat. 43,000 pounds of force behind her. The F-35 roared down the runway like it had always known who belonged in the cockpit. No one watching from the tower believed it. But she wasn't flying this jet for them. She was flying for the ones who couldn't, for the people in Frankfurt, for the children walking to school, for the pilots who weren't ready, for the system that had overlooked her, and for the silence that had trained her, watched her, shaped her. They thought she was just ground crew, but now the sky belonged to her. How do you steady your breath when the whole world is holding its own? Mila banked left through a pocket of silver blue sky. Shadow draped across the Rhine River far below. Less than 7 minutes after rotation, she was already climbing through. 22,000 feet. The last piece sliding into a formation that had trained together for years. Except her, Martinez up front, calm but clipped. Chun on the high right, a phantom of discipline. Davidson on the low left, fists tense around the stick. and Mila Falcon 4 settling in at their 6, heart thundering like a second engine. Falcon 4, report fuel and systems, Martinez demanded, the gravel in his voice trying to pretend this was routine. Fuel 9.3, hydraulics. 100% primary-secondary bypass green. All avionics nominal, Mela answered, the cadence almost automatic. She kept her tone light, but inside she felt the pinch of anxiety wrap around her ribs. She wasn't worried about the jet. She trusted the jet. It was the eyes inside 3 other helmets, the ones that didn't know her. Didn't know why they trusted her life between their wingtip and the endless drop. Chun broke the silence. Not bad for a thief, Falcon 4. A beat of laughter that sounded too sharp. Too thin, Mela let it pass. Humor was a defense. She'd seen cruise joke while loading live ordnance. Hands shaking over fuses ahead. The flight path shimmered on her HNDS visor. 4 red triangles drifting toward German airspace from the Baltic corridor. No squawk, no reply. Recon birds or rogue fighters, nobody knew yet. What mattered was closing the gap before those triangles slipped past Frankfurt and began reading the secrets. Under NATO's skin, she checked her breathing. In out, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. They still think you're a trespasser, though. Thought skimmed the edge of her focus like a stone across water. She forced it away. Now wasn't the time for doubt. Raptor flight switched to TAC 2. Martinez's order clicked, and the 4 jets slipped to the encrypted channel. His voice lost the performative edge. This was the private room, where fears spoke softer. Listen up, he said. Unknown formation is holding Mach 09 or 5 at 31,000. If they see 4 F-35s charging out of the west, they'll know they're spotted. We close quiet, ident, and escort. Rules of engagement stay green unless they paint us. Mila swallowed escort. That meant getting close enough to count rivets. Closer still to read intentions written in angle of attack and throttle whispers. If the intruders bolted, she'd need every ounce of control she'd practiced in dark rooms while others were asleep. She glanced at Davidson's icon. The kid was good on paper. Sterling in Sims Alive airspace. She could almost feel his pulse spiking through. The data link she remembered being 17, glued to an old CRT display in Key, while her father narrated dogfight footage. First time in the blue feels like drowning, he'd said, but you find a surface eventually. Trust the training more than the fear. Falcon 3. She called to Davidson. Watch your closure rate. Don't overtake me when we roll to trail. Copy, he replied, voice tight. A note of gratitude slipped through, instruction without. Judgment, that's what she would have wanted in his seat. The distance numbers scrolled down. 90 miles, 83, 71. Radar blossoms grew sharper. The computer painting aircraft silhouettes they still couldn't see with the naked eye. Electronic support measures picked up exotic waveforms, Russian-made sensor suites. Heavily modified, reconnaissance all right, but wearing the dress uniform of a predator. 60 miles, Mila felt the F-35 settle into its element, the airflow smoothing around the chine. The lift van doors flush. She eased her left hand, rolled her shoulders, micro-adjustments, like a string player tuning mid-concerto. Ignored, the word drifted across her mind. A ghost of every briefing where she'd stood at the back. Ideas unsaid. Anxious. The sensation of the entire chain of command perched on her canopy. Waiting for her to fail, determined. That one burned brightest. A coal at the center of her chest. Raptor flight. Go MCON Alpha. Martinez dimmed their electronic signatures. Mila mirrored him, killing non-essential broadcasts. They were 4 moving shadows now, closing on 4 more 54 miles. The unknowns turned 5 degrees south. A minor drift enough to skirt civilian lanes, yet keep them on line for the Frankfurt industrial belt. Mela pictured the labyrinth of rail yards, chemical plants, power substations, soft targets humming with unwritten stories. Intel says their window's 9 minutes, Chun muttered. We missed this pinch. They vanish behind 50,000. Civilian returns. Martinez exhaled audibly. Not on my watch. 41 miles. A flicker of static, then the open distress frequency crackled Harrison from base ops. Voice boxed in by command post walls. Raptor flight, be advised German. Air defense scrambling Eurofighters, but ETA 15 plus. Your primary intercept until relieved. Translation. You are alone out there. Mila already knew 36 miles. Suddenly, her RWR bloomed a sweep of radar energy brushing the formation's flank. Not a lock, just a search beam taste. She imagined the intruders seeing ghost echoes. Trying to decide if the high-tech phantom creeping behind them was wind or war, the internal channels stayed quiet. Nobody wanted to speak the fear aloud. They were inside the dance space now. One wrong step would turn the waltz into a knife fight. 28 miles. Visual in 10, Martinez said. His tone found a lower register, where excitement and dread. Share cartilage. Falcon 4. Slide right 200. I want eyes from both sides. Acknowledged. Mila feathered right, her jet drifting with a lover's grace. Cloud-tattered sunlight strobed across the canopy, turning her reflection into shards. She steadied her breathing again. Then there they were. 4 Su-35 derivatives. Slate gray. Intake lips painted with a thin red stripe like a smirk. Sensor pods bulged beneath the nose cones. IRST turrets glinting. Recon kits, yes. But each wore hardpoints empty only by choice. How close do you get to a predator before it decides your prey? The whisper slid through Mila's thoughts. Raptor flight, push VHF guard, Martinez ordered. He cleared his throat. Unidentified aircraft at grid 24 Alpha. This is NATO flight on intercept vector. Identify and state intentions, seconds. Stretched, Mila pictured a cockpit across the void Commander Petrov. Maybe considering his reply, when it came, the accent was Slavic. The tone velvet over iron. NATO flight. This is independent reconnaissance mission, November 7-2. We are conducting lawful activity in international airspace. Mila's jaw clenched. Lawful technically, yes. Ethical debatable. She scanned their wingtips again. Something fell off. Those recon pods were generations beyond anything Mass exported. These birds weren't just looking. They were learning how NATO learned. Martinez tried again. Recon November 7-2. Your track approaches restricted zones for critical infrastructure. Alter course 10 degrees north immediately. A beat. Then the lead Su-35 responded, cordial. Negative, NATO flight. We will maintain present heading. Your escort is acknowledged. On the private net, Chun hissed. They're playing chicken? Davidson's voice cracked faintly. If they breach the Frankfurt buffer, rules let. U.S. hail then fire warning shots, right? That's doctrine, Martinez answered. Let's hope doctrine is enough. Mila glanced at her EW display waves of data spooling across. The Su-35 sensors were painting them, sucking up electronic fingerprints like pickpockets. Each second they lingered, the enemy learned more. She keyed the net. Flight lead. They're actively profiling our systems. We're feeding them gold, Martinez sighed. Options? Show them fool's gold, she said. Burn through with advanced maneuvers. Things they can't replicate. We muddy their intel, make data contradictory, Chen whistled. Turn the lesson back on the teacher. It risked midair. Martinez warned. We risk more by giving them a playbook, Mela countered. Silence, decision time, copy. Falcon 4 will flex. On my mark break pattern, demonstrate high alpha roll, then reform. Falcon 3. Follow Falcon 4's lead for sync. Roger. Davidson stammered. Mala's stomach fluttered, ignored, anxious. She let the sensations pass through her like weather, determined, that remained. Mark. She pulled back, throttled, threw the F-35 into a climbing spiral at the edge of supersonic. Nose pitched 45 degrees. The fang rattled her frame but stayed within envelope limits. Her helmet display flooded with stall warnings she'd rehearsed away months ago. And just like that, she pivoted at the apex, rolled inverted, and sliced back down to the formation plane within 100 feet of Davidson's right wing. From outside, it must have looked like the jet folded space. Holy, Davidson breathed. He matched her a heartbeat later, his own maneuver sloppier but serviceable. The Su-35s drifted, their sensors reevaluating everything. Their lead pilot might have smiled or frowned. Hard to guess. Chung chuckled. Heard of show of force, but that was ballet. Martinez. Recon flight, we advise immediate course change. Last warning. Another pause. Finally, the Su-35 lead replied, tone still cool but edged now with grudging. Respect. NATO flight. We will alter 5 degrees north as courtesy, but we reserve right to continue lawful recon. Mila's pulse slowed. Not victory, yet not defeat. A 5-degree slide bought precious miles enough. She didn't know, but she felt something shift inside the cockpit subtle, like a knot loosening. For the first time, the other pilots' doubt eased. They'd seen her hands. They'd flown in her wake. She wasn't a question mark anymore. She was an answer they hadn't expected. Still, tension coiled. The specter of escalation lurked, and the clock kept ticking. Intel windows, fuel margins, political patience, any of them could snap first. Martinez's voice softened. Falcon. 4, good work. A simple phrase. 2 words. But it weighed more than any metal she could imagine. Validation, fragile as glass, carried on encrypted air. She allowed herself half a smile, proud, and immediately, after broken, the word flickered unbidden. Because pride came with a price. Isolation. The higher she climbed, the fewer people understood the view. The formation settled. They bought time minutes, maybe more, enough to figure out the next move. But as wisps of cirrus slid past her canopy, Mila sensed the story wasn't done bending. Somewhere below, someone could still decide conversations weren't enough. Somewhere in the mountains, a radar array could wake. A missile truck's cover could peel back. Hopeful, she thought, feeling it like a fragile spark inside her chest plate. And then, quietly, she made room for another loop of suspense, a question she wouldn't answer yet. If the sky demanded a greater sacrifice, would she give it? The jet hummed, steady and patient, as if it already knew. Asterisk. What happens when the sky turns against you? 20 minutes into the escort, the blue above Germany shattered into fire. Mila's radar warning receiver screamed, a sharp, rising alarm that sliced through the quiet coordination like a blade. Her electronic warfare panel lit up in angry reds and yellows. 6 missiles, high speed, surface to air, launched from somewhere they never should been. Missiles inbound. She barked into the comms, voice tight, trained. Multiple SAM launches, bearing 180, climbing from terrain shadow, 80 seconds to impact. Break! Break! Martinez roared. All aircraft execute evasive maneuvers, deploy countermeasures, maintain formation if possible. The formation fragmented in an instant. 4 F-35s, arcing and twisting through the sky like sparks blown from a forge. Chaff bloomed behind Mila's jet. Flares streaked into the air like dying stars. The world became physics, instinct, velocity. But this wasn't random chaos. Mila was already recalculating in her head mapping terrain contours, predicting missile arcs. She'd seen this before. In training simulations so detailed, they blurred the line between fiction and fatal. These launch vectors form a trap. She shouted, "We're being funneled, standard evasion won't work. If we don't coordinate, we'll bleed into the kill box one by one." Then what? Martinez snapped. His jet flashed past hers, upside down, smoke trails spiraling behind. Tactic. 7, she called. Dead silence on the net for a heartbeat. "You want us to execute Tactic 7? Davidson gasped. "In real combat? It's that or die one at a time." Mila barked back. Martinez didn't hesitate. Raptor Flight Tactic 7 on my mark. Tactic 7 wasn't taught in standard flight school. It required trust, timing, shared breath between aircraft, a maneuver born not from firepower, but from synchronized survival. 4 jets weaving through mountain shadows, using radar nulls and synchronized electronic jamming to blind missile seekers, break locks, confuse. Guidance systems, Mark. They dove hard. Mila flipped her F-35 into a downward spiral, hugging a granite ridge so close her terrain warning system screamed. G-forces crushed her chest. Vision tunneled. She forced her breath through gritted teeth. Beside her, Chun's F-35 sliced through a narrow pass like a bullet through a keyhole. Martinez's jet traced the ridge. Davidson wobbled too high. Falcon 3, drop now. Mela yelled. Davidson corrected, barely skimming the ridge. Missile lock indicators blinking furiously. Their electronic warfare suite lit up in perfect sync, 4 jammers firing in orchestrated pulses. Their radar signatures vanished and reappeared, ghosting through the terrain. 5 missiles lost lock, but not all. Falcon 4 still has 1 tracking, she reported, her voice calm, detached. 15 seconds to impact. She leveled her wings, eyes scanning. Her options were minimal. Speed wouldn't help. Altitude was a trap. But the ridge to her left, it offered shadow. She dove low, knife edging the aircraft, 1 wingtip barely clearing the rock. Her hands moved without thought. Years of study, months of practice, a dozen whispered sessions and stolen simulator time, all leading here. Missile proximity warning. The HUD flashed. 10 seconds. She pulled hard, the aircraft groaning beneath her. A climbing turn into the blind spot, altitude bleeding fast, and then silence. Missile guidance broken. She exhaled. Her F-35 climbed out of the mountain shadow like a ghost. Threat neutralized. Martinez whooped over the net. Nice flying, Falcon 4, damn. But Mila didn't answer. Not yet. Because as the team regrouped at 25,000 feet, systems intact, another realization was forming. This wasn't random. It wasn't opportunistic. It was a trap. Flight lead, this ambush was planned. She said, look at the launch points. Time to catch us post-intercept in a narrow corridor. Someone studied our intercept doctrine. Martinez's voice lost its edge. They knew our response time, our flight paths, even the altitude stack. Chun's voice was soft. This wasn't about pushing a border. It was about testing us, Mila said. Learning us. And then Petrov, the lead pilot of the recon group, cut across the frequency. NATO flight. We've just received a separate warning. More launch platforms along your return route. This was only phase 1. No one spoke for a moment. The sky had gone quiet again. Too quiet. The F-35's engines whispered through thinning air. Mila's breath slowed. Her fingers loosened on the stick. The reality settled like ice. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. When do you stop following orders and start following what you know is right? Mila landed the F-35 with the precision of a seasoned aviator. The wheels kissed the runway as if even the jet understood the weight of what had just happened. She taxied to a halt in eerie quiet. No cheering, no salutes, just a distant echo of alarms still ringing from the chaos they'd left behind in the sky. The hangar was already waiting for her, not with medals, not even with questions, with guards. 4 MPs stood at the bottom of the ladder. Their stances weren't hostile, but they weren't friendly either. She popped a canopy, inhaling the taste of jet fuel, sweat, and the brutal air of consequences. Senior Airman Kuznetsova, one of the officers said, voice unreadable. You're to report to the debriefing room. Now. She nodded. No fight. No resistance. Shed already made her stand. Now came the fallout. The briefing room had been transformed. Not a place for reviewing tactics anymore. It looked like a courtroom wrapped in a military uniform. Colonel Mitchell was there, stoic, sharp-eyed. So was Lieutenant Colonel Peterson, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Major Harrison had the look of a man whose filing system had caught fire. And two civilians in suits sat quietly, the kind whose silence always meant authority. Mila stood alone in front of them. Her flight suit was still damp with sweat. Her gloves still held the memory of the stick. Her eyes didn't blink. Senior Airman Kuznetsova, Colonel Mitchell began, her tone flat. You violated multiple military regulations. You launched without orders, operated a classified combat platform, engaged hostile forces without authorization. Mila didn't move. Peterson leaned forward. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done? Yes, sir. And yet, Mitchell continued, setting down her tablet, your actions prevented a major intelligence failure. Your analysis during the mission was tactically sound. Your flight coordination exceeded expectations, and your understanding of the adversary's ambush was the reason all 4 aircraft made it back alive. The room shifted. The silence deepened. One of the civilians spoke. His voice was careful, deliberate. Your recommendations in the air were more advanced than what we've seen from pilots with hundreds of logged combat hours. Where exactly did you learn these tactics? Mila answered plainly. My father is a retired Ukrainian Air Force colonel. I trained under him before joining. I logged over 300 hours of simulator time on advanced systems, most of it on my own. You studied independently? The man asked. Yes, systems, protocols, combat patterns, everything I could find. I didn't do it for rank. I did it because I wanted to be ready. If the moment ever came, Peterson shook his head, almost in disbelief. Even if your skills are real, even if today you were right, how can we have a military if people pick and choose when to follow orders? Mila spoke for the first time with emotion in her voice. Sir, I know what I risked. My career, my freedom, maybe more. But when those jets launched and the fourth seat was empty, I was the only one who could fill it. I didn't break rules. Out of ego, I broke them because I saw a gap. And I knew what would happen if no one stepped into it. You could have killed someone, Harrison said. You could have died. You could have escalated an international incident. I know. Mila replied. But if I hadn't gone up, I'd still be standing in that hangar while 4 pilots died. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It wasn't even accusatory. It was uncertain, because she wasn't wrong. But she hadn't been right. Either not in the way the system understood. Colonel. Mitchell stood, slowly, her hands folded behind her back. Here is what I know, she said. You shouldn't have flown that mission, but you were the only one who could. You shouldn't have had that level of tactical expertise, but you did. And you shouldn't be standing here right now, but you are. She paused. You didn't just act outside the system. Kuznetsova, you proved the system might be broken. Mila said nothing. Her chest rose and fell with steady breath. Not proud, not defiant, just honest. Another pause. The second civilian consulted his tablet, then nodded. After discussion with NATO command and coordination with U.S. and German authorities, the man said, We've reached a decision, Mila braced. You are relieved of your current duties. Her stomach dropped and immediately reassigned to specialized tactical pilot training, effective today. For a moment, she didn't understand the words. They didn't make sense. She looked at them, at Mitchell, at Peterson. You're sending me to pilot school? Not just school, Mitchell said, smiling faintly. We're sending you to test pilot command, where you'll train for what you already know how to do and more. Peterson grunted. You're damn lucky. No, sir, Mila said softly. And prepared. The panel rose, the room began to empty. Mila remained still, the truth settling like a sunrise over her shoulders. She hadn't just stolen a plane. She had proven that skill can exist in silence. That preparation doesn't always need a spotlight. That sometimes authority has to yield to necessity. Colonel Mitchell lingered as the others left. Sometimes, she said, dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She held Mila's gaze. Go earn your wings, airman. This time, the right way. Mila nodded, finally allowing herself a breath she'd been holding since the moment she touched the throttle. She'd climbed in alone, but she wouldn't fly alone again. How do you train for something you've already lived? Weeks later, Mila stood at the edge of the airfield in Nevada, hot wind pressing against her face. Desert sun drying sweat across her brow. She wasn't in her Ramstein uniform anymore. No maintenance patch, no wrench pin, just a flight suit with her name embroidered in black over gray. Senior Airman Mila Kuznetsova, F-35 test pilot candidate. She still hadn't gotten used to the title, not because she didn't believe she deserved it, but because it still felt like she'd smuggled her way through the system with nothing but quiet and relentless preparation. Every day at the training facility tested her, but not the way people expected. The other trainees had years of formal schooling, flight time, instructor hours logged like tallies on a wall. Mila had none of that. She had everything else. The first few days, the instructors had treated her like an anomaly, respectful, but watchful, curious. Doubt simmered beneath the surface of every question they asked her, every procedure they assigned, until they saw her fly during the first in-air assessment. Mila navigated an aggressive systems failure simulation in record time, restarting a failed cooling circuit mid-roll, adjusting thrust vectoring manually, and executing a perfect emergency landing with only partial data from her HUD. The instructors didn't say much, but their silence sounded different than it had at Ramstein. It was impressed, not dismissive, and still Mila felt alone. Not because they made her feel like an outsider, but because she was one no one else had. Learned to fly from bedtime stories, from whispered instructions in a Kyiv apartment by a man who once flew a MiG with bullet holes in the fuselage. No one else had practiced her entire life without knowing if she'd ever take off. In the evenings, she sat at the edge of the tarmac, notebook in hand, sketching diagrams of radar cross-section profiles and flight envelope margins. Most of the other trainees relaxed at the gym or watched movies in their rooms. Mila kept her habits. Martinez had written her a message the day after she was reassigned. Just one line. You earned it. We all saw it. Don't let anyone forget why. She hadn't written back yet. She didn't know how. She wasn't ready to process what she had left behind. Peterson hadn't spoken to her since the panel, but she heard through channels that he had testified in her favor when NATO requested her full flight history. That meant something, maybe still. Some days, doubt crept in. The instructors treated her fairly, but fairly didn't mean easily. They gave her the hardest sims, the most complex flight scenarios. They tested her composure, her instincts, her patience. Some nights, she lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was what real acceptance felt like, or if she was simply being tolerated, proven useful in the moment. But then, she'd remember Frankfurt. The sky, the heat, the missiles, the silence in her headset when no one else knew what to do, and the voice inside her that said, you belong here. You've always belonged. Her roommate at training, Captain Sarah Blake, had been flying F-16s for 5 years before switching over, a veteran, smart, confident, sharp-tongued, and harder-edged. She didn't speak to Mila for the first 3 days. Then, during a shared debrief, she pulled Mila aside. Everyone's got their version of your story, she said flatly. Some think it's inspiring. Some think it's reckless. I think it's real. You see patterns no one else sees. That's not learned. That's lived. Just don't forget that living it once doesn't mean you're done proving it. Mila nodded, quiet as ever. That night, Blake left an energy bar on her desk with a note scrawled on the wrapper. Next test's a burner. Eat something. That was the closest. Cling to a friendship Mila had allowed herself in weeks, and somehow it was enough. Her favorite part of the training came during the long sim hours, when she slipped back into that focused state of mind, surrounded by nothing but instruments and silence. In those moments, she was a child again, listening to her father explain the relationship between lift and angle, G-force and willpower. The instructors watched her through two-way glass, taking notes, but Mila didn't perform for them. She was still flying for the people who never saw her in the first place, for the women back home who never got past enlisted ranks, for the airmen who thought they weren't allowed to dream in languages that weren't English. She knew the system would take longer to change than one mission or one pilot, but she also knew this: no one could unfly what she'd flown, no one could erase what she'd survived, and no one could stop what was already in motion. One evening, Colonel Mitchell called her directly, not through command, not through paperwork, just a private video call, old school, clean and honest. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You didn't ask for permission, but you earned respect. That's the difference." Mila nodded. "You'll be in Brussels next month." Mitchell continued. "They want you to speak. NATO summit, closed doors, a story about talent, readiness, institutional blind spots." Mila's stomach twisted. "I'm not a speaker," she said quietly. "No," Mitchell agreed. "You're a pilot. Speak like one, brief it, done, decorate it." "I'll try." "Don't try," Mitchell said, a soft smile breaking through her command. "Just tell the truth." And that, Mila thought, might be the scariest mission yet. What do you say when they finally listen? Brussels was cold that morning. Not winter cold, not battlefield cold. A polished, bureaucratic kind of cold, glass corridors, steel conference rooms, voices measured in syllables and political timing. Mila stood in the hallway outside the chamber, wearing her newly issued flight jacket. No ribbons, no rank flourish, just the American flag on one arm and a stitched nameplate that hadn't even started to feel real. Kuznetsov F-35 Program Advanced Pilot Tier 9 inside the NATO summit, buzzed with controlled diplomacy, generals, defense ministers, policy architects, all in dark suits and measured expressions. The kind of room where wars are prevented or predicted, where people usually like their heroes to look neat, speak softly, and stay in line. She stepped inside when called. No introduction, no applause. Just the silence of decision-makers waiting to hear what a former ground crew member who'd stolen a fighter jet might possibly have to say that was worth their time. Mila stood at the center of the room, hands at her sides, no script, no rehearsed speech. She just spoke. "I was maintenance crew," she began. "That's how you saw me. That's how the system labeled me." A few faces blinked. One pen stopped moving. But when the fourth jet was grounded and there were missiles on approach, you didn't ask for a title. You needed a pilot, and no one else was in the cockpit. She paused. "I wasn't certified. I wasn't endorsed, but I was ready." She let the silence hang there. Let them sit with it. "I didn't prepare to be a hero. I prepared because I knew no one else would prepare for me. I studied when I wasn't asked to, trained when I wasn't invited, simulated missions that weren't mine to fly." She looked around the room, not with defiance but calm conviction. There are more like me, in your hangars, in your barracks, in the seats you never see, people who know what to do. If you ever decide to ask. Someone shifted in their chair. Another looked away. Talent doesn't wait for permission. Readiness doesn't wear a particular patch. And sometimes the person who can fly the plane is the one you didn't even know was standing next to it. She stopped there. No flourish, no applause cue. Just the quiet that comes after a truth has landed. When she exited, Mitchell was waiting in the hallway. "You shook them," the colonel said, arms folded. "Some of them won't like it." "I didn't come to be liked," Mila replied. "No," Mitchell agreed. "You came to remind them." Weeks passed, then months. Mila continued training. moving through the F-35's most advanced simulation programs. She taught classes on radar counterprofiling. She wrote protocols for identifying behavioral anomalies in intercept formations. Her name started appearing quietly on documents people once wouldn't have even let her touch. She didn't become famous. That wasn't her story. But she became something better. She became undeniable. At Ramstein, stories of the ground crew girl who flew traveled in whispers. Some believed, some didn't, but the pilots who'd flown with her, they knew. They remembered the voice that saved them. And one cold morning, back in Germany, Martinez spotted a new call sign on the rotation board for a readiness drill. Falcon 4 LT. Kazanestufe he stared at for a moment, half smiling, half shaking his head. About damn time, he muttered. Mila's final test flight came under a moonless sky. No observers, no officials, just her and the jet. She sat in the cockpit, helmet on, fingers tracing the throttle, her breath fogging slightly against the visor. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't need to. When the engines ignited and the wheels lifted from the ground, she climbed alone, cutting through the dark air with a grace that had taken a lifetime to earn. No cameras, no headlines, just the sky, just the silence. And a woman who had waited her whole life for this moment, not to be seen, not to be praised, but to fly.